This week, a remarkable case started in a Delaware court against Hunter Biden. And in the first hours, jurors heard Biden's voice, but not him on the witness stand, rather through his audiobook.
I bought crack cocaine on the streets of Washington, D.C., and cooked up my own inside a hotel bungalow in Los Angeles. I've been so desperate for a drink that I couldn't make the one-block walk between a liquor store and my apartment without uncapping the bottle to take a swig. In the last 5 years alone...
This is from the audio version of Biden's memoir, called Beautiful Things. And prosecutors in this federal case have been using Hunter's own words against him. He's facing felony charges over whether he was using illegal drugs when he bought a gun in 2018. Those charges have put Hunter and his father, President Biden, at the center of a very painful and very public criminal trial.
So this is a trial that at its core, it's 3 gun charges, but what the testimony could reveal are some pretty painful memories for the Biden family.
Perry Stein covers the Justice Department for The Post. She has been in the courtroom in Delaware following the trial.
So what we're expected to see throughout this trial is, and we've already seen some of it, is Hunter Biden really having to listen to prosecutors talk about some of his really vivid and graphic and dark drug abuse days.
And if convicted, Hunter Biden could face time in prison.
Obviously, for Hunter Biden, it matters, right? He could be a felon at the end of this. But also, we know that this Hunter Biden case has become a big deal politically. You know, Republicans have used this over and over again to try to show, to be clear, without evidence, that Joe Biden, the president, is corrupt and is implicated in whatever his son has been doing.
Of course, this all comes on the heels of former President Donald Trump's felony convictions last week in the New York hush money trial. And Republicans, along with media outlets like Fox News, are making sure to keep this case in the spotlight.
Hunter is already getting different treatment from the media than former President Trump. Cue the sympathy statements.
Trump was charged and convicted because of who he was. Hunter got away with everything for decades because of who he was.
So much hypocrisy, so little time.
And so because of this, a lot of people are watching this trial to see what happens, right? I mean, it comes months before his father's presidential re-election campaign, in which he is in a tight race with former President Trump, who has his own legal troubles.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Martine Powers. It's Wednesday, June 5th. Today, my colleague Perry Stein takes us inside the courtroom of the Hunter Biden case. She'll talk us through what exactly led to these charges against Hunter, why the prosecution is using his memoir as evidence, and what impact the case is having on President Biden and his re-election campaign. So before we get into what's been happening at the trial this week, I do want to talk about the facts of the case so far, what we know, what we don't know, and how we got here. So I want to go back in time and start with where it seems like the story here kind of starts, which is with the death of Hunter Biden's brother, Beau Biden. This is in 2015.
So Hunter Biden has said that he's always struggled with alcohol abuse and drug addiction. And in 2015, his brother, Beau Biden, died, who he said was his best friend. He died of brain cancer. And after that, that fueled a spiral for him. And this is a spiral that occurred, in the years after, up until he got clean. And during this spiral, he purchased a gun in 2018. In October 2018, he went to a Delaware gun shop, that's their home state, and he purchased a gun. Now, that in and of itself isn't illegal, but when he looked at the form, the federally required form to purchase a gun, there's a question on it that says something like, are you addicted or a user of drugs, illegal substances? And Hunter Biden selected no. He checked off no. And then he certified that for the background check. And then he, as prosecutors allege, possessed the gun for a total of 11 days as a drug user. So those are the 3 crimes that he is charged with. He is charged with 2 crimes related to lying on this form, this required form to obtain a gun, and then possessing the gun, this is just an allegation, while he was a drug user.
And do we know anything about why he bought this gun?
We don't know why Hunter Biden bought the gun. We know that he's not accused of committing any crimes with it. He had it for 11 days, and during that time, his attorney said in court on Tuesday that he neither loaded it nor used it. So we don't know why he bought the gun. According to the attorney, he was at getting a new cell phone across the street and stopped into the gun store and ended up buying a gun while he was there. So he got the gun. At the time, he was involved with Hallie Biden, that was his romantic partner, who was also his brother's widow. She somehow came across this gun. And this is all according to prosecutors and some other, records that we have, public records that we have seen, came across that gun, kind of freaked out when she saw it, and then threw the gun away in a trash can outside of a market in like a grocery store, in a trash can in a grocery store in Delaware. From there, Hunter, according to text messages that have been obtained by investigators, Hunter Biden realized what she did and was like, you got to get this gun back. Like, you can't that's so reckless to throw it away in a trash can. She went back to the grocery store. The gun was gone. Some guy who constantly sifts through trash cans to collect recyclable goods, he's expected to testify at this trial, apparently found the gun. Delaware State Police took possession of this gun. They found it with this guy. And so years later, the FBI then took control of the gun.
So all this happened, as you said, about 6 years ago. How did this incident come back into the spotlight and end up with actual charges filed against Hunter Biden?
That's a really good question. I mean, look, we know there has been over the years, investigations into Hunter Biden, right? He's facing tax charges right now in California. That is scheduled to go to trial in September. And then, we know that he has been investigated, and, most FBI investigations, it should be said, do not lead to charges. But he has also been under investigation for violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act for some of his work abroad. So in searching through a lot of this evidence, they've come across some evidence related to his gun charge. So there's been a lot of investigations, and they've all kind of merged into these 2 indictments that we've seen, the tax charges and the gun charge.
And of course, this is all happening in the context of other accusations that have been made against Hunter Biden in the past and other allegations that he's dealing with, including so much about his laptop. And that has been a thing that Republicans have glommed onto. But I do want to just acknowledge for a second, what is the laptop controversy and what relationship, if any, does it have to the criminal trial that Hunter Biden is facing right now?
So Hunter Biden years ago dropped off a laptop to be fixed at a repair shop in Delaware, and he never picked it up. And at some point, the store owner called him to pick it up. He never picked it up, and the store owner declared it abandoned. And at the time, there was all this news going around about Biden, Hunter Biden, and his work in, this foreign group called Burisma, and the laptop shop owner had been hearing this on the news and decided he would be a, quote, whistleblower, right? He reached out to many Republicans, tried to get them to pay attention to this laptop. So Republicans got copies of what was on it, and it was just hundreds of thousands of text messages. There was a lot of, there were some nude photos. There was things detailing his drug abuse. Newspapers printed it. The Republicans tried to use whatever was in it to link it to, Joe Biden himself. They never did. There were conspiracy theories around it, but it just became a lot of political fodder all around Hunter Biden because of this laptop.
But just to be clear, Hunter Biden's laptop is not a part of this trial, correct?
It's not the heart of the trial. So the laptop was actually, the physical laptop was actually presented as evidence, right? They gave it to an FBI agent who was testifying to identify it. The reason why it's relevant here is they used it to take some text messages from his hard drive, from his computer, that showed evidence of addiction.
So the trial officially got underway this week. Started with jury selection. That went by pretty quickly. We now have a jury of 12 people, 6 men, 6 women. But after jury selection, we heard opening statements from both the prosecution and the defense. So what were those opening statements, and what kinds of arguments have we heard so far that the prosecution and the defense are making?
So the prosecutor said, no one is above the law, right? Now, look, something really interesting that happened in jury selection was really a kind of heartbreaking indictment on America's, drug epidemic, right? Prospective juror after prospective juror got up there in front of the judge and said, we have relatives who have been battling drug addiction. We know people, and that was a question they were asked, their experiences with drug addiction. So we know there's a lot of people on that jury who have a loved one who has gone through what Hunter Biden has gone through. And they are likely going to be very, empathetic, like very good people can have drug addictions, right? And it's often not a choice and something that is, out of their control. So what you saw was prosecutors get up and say, look, drug addiction, it may not be a choice, but buying a gun is a choice. And he bought this gun and knowingly lied. And so what they have to prove is that he was using drugs and knew he was using drugs and lied about it when he filled out the form.
So during the first days of testimony, I know that prosecutors played sections from the audiobook of Hunter Biden's memoir, in which he talks about his struggles with addiction. What was that like? Like, what did it feel like in the room to hear the defendant's voice booming out, talking about this very dark and very personal stuff?
Yeah, I think it was pretty striking and unusual evidence, right, to be presented and for the whole courtroom to be silent, for Hunter Biden to be sitting there, for the jury to be looking at him, and to have his voice describe in graphic detail this drug use.
Everything that followed my return to L.A. was a genuine dictionary definition blur of complete and utter debauchery. I was doing nothing but drinking and drugging.
And you saw that it seemed to take an emotional toll on his family. His sister, Ashley, you could see she was wiping her eyes. Jill Biden, the first lady, leaned her head on Ashley Biden's shoulder. Ashley Biden also got up in the middle and didn't come back. So I think that was hard on the family, too, to see this book that I think he views as kind of him coming to terms with his past and to be used against him in the court of law.
So we heard what the prosecution is arguing. After the break, I talk with Perry about how the defense is tackling this case. We'll be right back. What is the argument of the defense here? If you have even this memoir that he wrote talking about his struggles with drug addiction during this period, like, how is the defense going to make the case that, well, yes, he talked about having a drug addiction, but he actually wasn't addicted to drugs when he bought this gun?
The defense is not shying away from the idea that Hunter was a drug addict. They say he's admitted it. The book says it. He's proud of his recovery journey. But what they're saying is that the prosecutors have the burden to prove not just that he used drugs during this general time frame, but that he knowingly lied on that form and was using crack and other illegal substances at the time that he purchased and owned this gun. So what they're saying is, look, he had come back from rehab at the time. He was using alcohol, but he wasn't a crack addict at that time. He wasn't using these drugs. Yes, he relapsed later, but during this time, he did not knowingly lie on that form.
I also want to talk briefly about the charge itself, because from my understanding from your reporting, it is actually pretty unusual to have these kinds of gun charges standing alone in a case like this. Can you speak to that?
I mean, lots of people own guns in this country, right? And the government isn't going around kind of randomly drug testing people who own guns to see if they lied when they bought their gun. They're not drug testing people when they buy their gun. So typically when someone is charged with this crime, it is attached to another crime, meaning maybe someone did an armed burglary and they brought him into custody and they saw that he seemed like he was not sober and they did a drug test. So this is pretty unusual of crime, but it's not impossible. It's not like no one's been charged with it, and it's a law on the books. I talked to one lawyer who's a Second Amendment expert, and he was like, well, like it's on the books to prevent people who have drugs from owning a gun. So that means when people break that, they should charge them. It's a law, so they are alleging he broke that law, but it's a rare one to be charged with.
Perry, you talked about the reactions that we've seen so far from some of the family members who have been in the court, and the fact that First Lady Jill Biden is there and in attendance and showing her support. I know that President Biden has not been there, though he's put out a comment or a statement expressing full-throated support for Hunter. But I'm wondering if you have a sense of what kind of emotional impact this trial is having on the president right now.
Right. And I know this a lot from my colleagues, reporters. I know Matt Visor and Tyler Pager have really reported on this, that Joe Biden, the president, is really close with Hunter. I think he is very worried about what this trial is doing to him, could do to him. He was in Wilmington. He didn't show up. I mean, I think that would be quite a logistical hurdle. And I'm sure a lot of the jurors have opinions on the president too. So there's lots of reasons why he wouldn't want to show up to trial. But we know that this is taking an emotional toll on him. We know that he's upset about this, and we know that he loves and worries about Hunter. His statement, said that Hunter, we're very proud of his recovery. We know millions of American families have experienced what we've experienced. This is hard on them. We've had reports in the past on days when the Hunter has been in court. Joe Biden likes to clear his schedule.
And then there's a timing question, too. The fact that this is coming right after we got the verdict in the hush money trial of President Trump. And I think it's, important to acknowledge the distinction there, right? That like President Trump is running for office and was tried for crimes that a jury decided that he committed. Whereas this is the president's son who is not running for office. And, these are not crimes that President Biden himself is alleged to have done. But it does feel like it puts Biden in dicey territory to try to capitalize on what it means that his opponent was just found guilty of crimes when his son is currently facing prosecution for crimes.
Right. It's tough. And I think you make a good point. Hunter Biden is not a political figure. He's the child of a political figure who has never held elected office, right? But I think one way to look at it, right? I mean, when the verdict came out in New York, I believe Joe Biden put out a statement that said, I respect the judicial process. If Hunter Biden is found guilty, is he going to say the same thing? So far, he's made a few comments here and there, but for the most part, we have seen no evidence that he's interfered with this investigation at all, right? So we don't know. I think his reaction, if there is a guilty verdict, we'll say if he has a similar reaction that he had to the Trump trial. But, we know that Republicans have really latched on to Hunter Biden, right? Republicans have done it for years, and I'm sure they will continue to do so. And right now, we're months before the election.
Perry, thank you so much for explaining all this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Perry Stein covers the Justice Department for The Post. Today, as the Hunter Biden trial entered its third day, prosecutors called Biden's ex-wife, Kathleen Buell, and his ex-girlfriend, Zoe Keston, to testify in his trial. They asked the two women about cocaine and crack cocaine use by Biden. And in their cross-examination, the defense tried to show that the evidence presented by prosecutors so far does not directly prove that the president's son was using illegal drugs when he bought the gun. And before we go, here's one other story I'm following today.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying two American heroes, drawing a line to the stars for all of us.
The Starliner spacecraft successfully entered orbit today. After many setbacks and delays, it is Boeing's first successful launch with two astronauts on board. The Starliner will travel at more than 17,000 miles an hour to catch up to the International Space Station. It will then park itself at one of the docking ports, where it's scheduled to stay for about a week. The astronauts will inspect the capsule to learn how well it operates in the vacuum of space and to determine whether it could be a safe haven in the event of an emergency at the station. If all goes well, NASA would certify Starliner for regular missions, carrying a full contingent of 4 astronauts to the space station. It would, for the first time, give NASA 2 American-made vehicles to ferry astronauts there. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. If you're looking for the latest updates on the big news of the day, check out our morning news briefing, The 7. We bring you through the 7 stories that you need to know about every weekday morning by 7 a.m. You can listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's show is produced by Peter Bresnan with help from Rennie Svirnovsky. It was mixed by Sean Carter and edited by Monica Campbell. I'm Martine Powers. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.